हेलो आयुष सर।
सतीश।
सर एक्चुअली वो जो लास्ट क्वेश्चन मैं उनसे करने वाला था उनका जवाब वो पहले दे चुके थे, तो
ठीक।
आई डिड नॉट वांट टू वेस्ट द टाइम ऑफ द
Good, good,
सेशन।
good, good.
थैंक
Absolutely great. Thank you so much. Very good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, beta.
Another 2 minutes, ma'am. Last session ended at 11:40. So,
No issue, no issue. I am just keep on
yes,
joining. You let me know.
yeah, absolutely, ma'am. Absolutely.
Okay.
Respected ma'am, with your permission, if we can start now. Ma'am, very good afternoon, ma'am.
Good afternoon, beta.
So, with your permission, we are beginning with the second session on the fourth day of the CBP. And because हम लोग HPNLU में we are very closely associated and working with मैम, तो एक ही बात मैम के लिए याद आता है मुझे, कुछ लाइंस हैं कि कुछ लोग थे जो वक्त के सांचे में ढल गए, कुछ लोग थे जो वक्त के सांचे बदल गए। तो HPNLU का सांचा अगर कोई बदल रहा है तो वो मैम बदल रही हैं, and we are seeing it live here. And this CBP, all the participants would agree with me, the kind of resource persons that we have here, that also is reflective of the kind of support that we have from our Honorable Vice Chancellor. Okay, in terms of introducing ma'am, the only term that I can say is that I'm incapacitated. Ma'am's achievements and accolades far exceed any introduction that it might need. The only thing and some of the very prominent things that I would point or that I would like to mention here as an introduction to our Honorable Vice Chancellor is that ma'am has been Head and Dean of Faculty, Punjab University. She is currently the Vice Chancellor of HPNLU. She has also worked with the Juvenile Justice Board. She has also written many books, numerous books, and numerous articles. One of the most great achievement of ma'am is that she has been cited by the Honorable Supreme Court in one of the judgments. She has also been awarded British Academy Visiting Professor in 1992, and she has done research in the past with the School of Oriental and African Studies, SOAS University of London. Her field of specialization include constitutional law, constitutional governance, administrative law, and environmental law. Today, we have this opportunity of hearing ma'am's words on the topic of women and their position in India traditionally.
Ayush, I told Chanchal, tomorrow I'll be talking on women, today
Okay.
on the concept of
Power,
accountability and good
liberty,
governance.
accountability.
Yes.
Okay. I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry about that. I would correct myself. So the topic for today would be developing the concepts of power, liberty, accountability, and good governance in the context of Hindu philosophy. With that, may I request our Honorable Vice Chancellor, ma'am, to begin enlightening the participants. Ma'am, please, over to you.
Thank you, Ayush. And it's really a pleasure to be one among you, all the participants. And this topic is of paramount importance, not only in our lives, but in our professions also. Once we talk about whether the concept of power, liberty, accountability, or good governance, immediately we are reminded of why we need to talk about all these concepts, and that too in the context of Hindu philosophy. I would just like to refer to that in every civilization, we have to concentrate on certain things so as to save the civilization. I can talk about Brooks Adams, what he said in 1895, that in case of every civilization, there is a cycle of decentralization and decay. You may take the example of Roman Empire, Roman civilization, because Roman civilization, how it rose and how the fall was there because of concentration was ultimately on slavery. So now here starts this concept of power. And when we talk about decay, I think we need to refer to another very, very important norm, that is discipline. And there's a very wise proclamation: lawlessness is the son of anarchy and brother of violence. And I'm reminded of how we learned from the Vedic ages, even through our epics. I can talk about Ramayana. Shri Ramachandra, whom we take as God, incarnation of Lord Vishnu. When he was going to get the kingship, suddenly the fate changed everything. It was the destiny. And announcement of his exile was there, Banvas. Now that situation, just imagine. Dashrath, he left kingship so as to pass it on to his son, eldest son. And eldest son had to be sent to Vanvas. Now, because Kaikeyi asked for this crown for her son, Bharat. Now, see, Ram going to Vanvas, Bharat not at all inclined to rule because he had a firm belief. Now, that is why we talk about a balance of good and bad. He had the firm belief that the crown, the throne belongs to his eldest brother. Now, here Ram telling Bharat that there cannot be any state without a ruler. King has to be there. Not only this, at that time, many rishis like Markande, Vamadeva, Kashyapa, Katyayana, Gautama, all these telling Vashisht that if there is no king, there will be arajakta, that is anarchy. And that is why there's a need for a king. Now, this is one situation. Now, I'll be talking about not only this, that there has to be a ruler, because I'm just referring to Hindu philosophy. I'm not going into social conduct theories where we talk about that why we submitted. So because we needed some regularization, regulation of our conduct in the mutual relationship in the society. So we needed some kind of governance and law and order situation so that there is no war against by everybody against everybody. Now that was the situation. We never wanted a law of jungle. Now, anarchy. I would just talk about what is anarchy. Now, in Ramayana only we find a reference to this ill effects of anarchy. न अराज के जनपदे प्रभुता नट नर्तका उत्सवा च समाजा च वर्धनते राष्ट्रवर्धना. This shloka, in fact, refers to, I'm going to tell you the meaning, but mainly it refers to the cultural progress of any nation, any state, any society. It literally means in a ruler-less territory, festivals and gatherings exalting the kingdom in which actors and dancers exhibit their talents are not frequently arranged. Further, we find a reference, न अराज के जनपदे कार्यांति सभाम नरा उद्यानानि च रम्याणि हृष्टा पुण्य ग्रहाणि च, which means, now again, no development. It is referring to if there is no ruler, there is no development. People do not cause to make a delightful assembly nor erect beautiful parks or temples. Because planning is required, finances are required. There has to be maybe a ruler, maybe some democratic setup. And in the current scenario also we find whatever form of government is there without any kind governance, there cannot be development. Further, I proceed the ill effects. This is very, very important. Only then we can understand the meaning of what is power, how power is to be exercised. न अराज के जनपदे सिद्ध अर्था व्यवहारिणः, which means litigants do not get their disputes settled if there is no ruler. न अराज के जनपदे उद्यानानि समागता साहायन क्रीडितुम यान्ति कुमार्यो हेम भूषिता. Now this I am going to relate with the present time situation also. Now this shloka means in a rulerless territory, girls adorned in gold do not go together to parks to play there in the evening. I think every day in the newspaper, all of you read about the eve teasing, gold snatching, and even during this pandemic, COVID pandemic situation also, you must have read the warnings by the police department. Don't wear precious jewelry. Don't move in the late evenings with the costly mobiles in your hands. No, that means I think I can give the signal and say that these are all signs of anarchy. Maybe there may be any reason. Now in Ramayana we did talk about only when there is no ruler. I further talk about, because mainly impact of all these shloka is that if there is no ruler, there will be no safety. Like says, na araj ke janpade dhanvanta sirkshita. I hope you understand. Rich people, they are also not safe. Dhanvanta, rich people are not safe. Sherte vivrite dwara krishi go raksha jivina. Now, if they are not safe, then the cattle will not be safe. And now it clearly talks about that nobody in that country, in that state, can sleep in their homes with their doors open. Can you refresh your minds? Now you are very young, perhaps you might not have seen. Those who belong to rural areas, they can still imagine. I also remember those days when I was a very small child, we never bothered that whether we have bolted our main door or not. It used to be done only during night time. And I am talking about, but say Ram Rajya. That is why where there is good governance, we call it as Ram Rajya. So if ruler is not there, safety is not there, security is not there, law and order issues will remain there. And it further says, Na araj ke janpade vanijo durgamina. Vanij are traders. Durgamina, they can't travel. Because then what may happen? Now, robbery may be there, dacoity. We read about robbers and dacoits in the ancient times also. न अराज के जनपदे चरति एक चरावशी भावयन आत्मना आत्मानम yatra sayam griho muni. Wonderful. It says, in a rulerless land, a monk who wanders alone, who has subdued his senses, who meditates himself on the soul, and who takes up an abode wherever evening overtakes him, cannot roam around the city. I hope you can remind yourselves that we talk about different phases of life. And after having our student life, our family life, Grihastha ashram, and then going to Banprasth and ultimately to sannyas. Now, sannyas, because sannyasi was not supposed to work for earning, not supposed to even cook. Even food was to be taken through dakshina. They used to go and beg for food. Now, monks roaming about. Now just relate it to the present day situation. And then we can talk about this anarchy. If some monk is roaming about, I think the first reaction by we, the educated people, will be he's schizophrenic. Because monk who is in sannyas cannot feel hot or cold. It doesn't make any difference to him whether it is raining or it's a hot sun, because he's much above it. Or what kind of saints, so-called saints, are there? I think you can imagine. You read in the newspapers what happens, and I can only use one word, that is fraud or cheating. Then न अराजके जनपदे योगक्षेमं प्रवर्तते अपि अराजके सेना शत्रून् विषयते युद्धि, which means योगक्षेमं प्रवर्तते, where gain and security are not established. And arajke means where there's anarchy. Then you cannot conquer the enemies. And this is true even today. If we are not prepared, then we'll suffer because of sudden attack. I think we can remind ourselves of the Kargil infiltration and other attacks, because in the modern times, now recently we read in the newspaper about the drone attack. Now, if we are not prepared, no, because we have governance, we have government, now we can respond back with the same vigor, same power, same wisdom, same experience. And similarly, we talk about throughout. In fact, we read in the Ramayana about this anarchy in all these situations. I just talk about another very, very important shloka. न अराजके जनपदे स्वकं भवति कस्यचित् मत्स्यायव न नित्यं भक्ष्यन्ति परस्परम्. Now, swakam, न राजके जनपदे स्वकं भवति कस्यचित्. Nothing belongs to anybody. You can't say it is my property. And it says, matsyayev, just like fishes, nara nityam bhakshanti parasparam. Each other. Then every person is bhakshanti, means to eating. Every person is ready to eat the other person. हम कहते हैं जैसे बड़ी मछली छोटी मछली को निगलने का तैयार है. Same is the situation. Now you can imagine in the present times also, whosoever has power is ready to swallow others. So that means, no, we will be correlating this to good. We don't talk that we don't have any kind of rule. We have a democratic system. But if the weak are not protected, then that means the governance is not good governance. Now, for good governance, whosoever may be the ruler. Now, during Ramayana time or Mahabharata time, we talk about kings. So I just refer to another shloka of Ramayana. Yatha drishti sharirasya nityamev pravartate narendro rashtrasya prabhava satya dharmayo. Which means, as the eyesight, drishti, eyesight is helpful for controlling your body, because when you walk, then you know whether there are steps, whether the road is not even. You take care, because your eyes, this is one of the senses you have, God has bestowed upon you. So comparison is to the king. The king is the eye of the state, of the country. And king can make you understand what is right, what is wrong, and accordingly, the king rules over the country. Now, here I must say that that means king can see anybody. That does not mean king has thousands of eyes. Those thousands of eyes are ministers, his officers, and simplest possible terms, if I say, if we want good governance, first of all, we have to trust in ourselves. And if we believe and say, look, God is omnipresent, God is omnipotent, God is watching us. So we have to be disciplined. I think there will be no issue. In the present times, we do talk about governance, good governance, but many a time we say we are more being administered than governed. And we talk about good administration also. What is administration? I'm not going into much detail in defining, but I just quote Luther Glick. He says, administration has to do with getting things done. But we are not satisfied. Then I talk about L.D. White. The definition given by him is, the art of administration is the direction, coordination, and control of many persons to achieve some purpose or objective. Wonderful. Direction. That means we have hierarchy. Somebody to direct. Coordination on the same also talk about. There is coordination. Like if the main ruler is there, the ministers are there, then there's a coordination also, and there's a purpose or objective. In India, we trace back this administration, I think 5,000 years old, because industrialist civilization is the number 2 in the world after Mesopotamian civilization. Now, king had been all powerful, but in all such situations, even though specifically the term Rajya Dharma was not used, but we followed Rajya Dharma, royal duties. And I feel like correlating with our constitution, the Sanctum Sanctorum. Remind yourselves of Article 74, which says there shall be a prime minister, there shall be a president who shall be advised by the prime minister and council of ministers. Right? So this is what is very, very important. And what was there? What we find in the earliest civilization. Now, in Vedic times, the Aryans, they were living in tribes. The chief of the tribe was known as Rajan. Then there was a Mukhya Mantri, Prime Minister. There were officers like Mahasandhi, Vigrahaka, Amatya, and all these. And even we talk about these Purohitas, Senani, Dutas are spies, and then Dutas are envoys, and then spies. During Mauryan period and Gupta period, we had the systematic model of administration. Now, even when I am talking about in Vedic time, where there were not state but tribes. That was something different, not that much advanced. Mauryan period, the king had all kinds of power: legislative, executive, as well as judicial. The laws which took birth through our Vedas, Shrutis, what we used to call as dharma, duty of the king, duty of the people, what is to be done, what is not to be done. King was the supreme commander of armed forces at that time. In Gupta period, which is known as Golden Age, but I feel a kind of gap started, a distance between the king, the ruler, and the ruled. Because if you go through the Gupta period, then you find the kings. They had pompous titles like Parameshwara, Maharaja, Dhiraja, and so and so. That means a status of being the most superior. Now, all kinds of powers are there, whether political, whether administrative, military, or judicial. But we find a clearer reference of Rajya. And at that time, as I was referring to Mukhya Mantri, the Prime Minister and other ministers were there. But collective wisdom was being used. There used to be collective sitting of king and the ministers, and then a decision was taken. Now, at the time, much emphasis was laid on the revenue administration. There used to be Kosha, and clearly we find a reference, even the writings of Kautilya, Arthashastra, that this Kosha Adhyaksh, because the Kosh, the treasure, has to be filled up by Nyaya. The term is Nyaya, by lawful means, by legal means. And whatever treasure was there, that was to be used for public welfare only. Now, here, once we talk about different periods where we had wonderful administration, and perhaps after taking clues from all these ages, we landed into where we are. I would like to talk about the qualities of a king, whosoever ruler. No, whatever the qualities of the king were prescribed at that time, those have relevance even today, even in the democratic setup. Whosoever is ruling must have all those qualities. Now, please concentrate on these qualities, because out of these qualities only we will be landing into what we call as use, misuse, or abuse of power, use of discretionary power, in contradiction to arbitrary exercise of power. Like I find a reference of all these, the duties of Rajya Dharma, qualities of Raja, in Kautilya's Arthashastra. काचे मणि मणौ काचो येषाम विद्धि प्रवर्तते न तेषाम सन्निधौ भृत्यो नाम मात्रो अपि तिष्ठति. Now, which says that, now this is relating to, try to understand, even today in every organization, focus is on merit. Raja can't work alone. Like in the democratic setup, no prime minister, no chief minister can function alone. So when appointments are to be made, now we may talk about my appointments of the ministers, and even in the present setup of the bureaucratic structure also. Now, kache is kanch, money is a gem. So the king must know the distinction between mere ordinary piece of glass or a gem. So that means when appointment is to be made, then it should be made on the basis of merit. And this law clearly says, Brityo nam matro api tishtati. If it is not based on merit, then the servant, the officer, whosoever it is, whatever the status is, will not stay there for a longer time. Now, psychologically, just go in introspection. Look into yourselves. Even in the modern times, we have one very, very important concept in management also, that is of or organizational psychology also, concept of job satisfaction. When you have job satisfaction, which you yearn for which you have spent years to attain education, and if your merit is not recognized, and you have to join some other petty job which is not meant for you, they will, no, see, first thing, no job satisfaction at all. And in the later stages of life, in the words of Rogers, you will not be fully functional person. In the words of Maslow, when we talk about his need theory, you will not be able to self-actualize yourself. And what we need, if we want to develop our country, if we want that there is a socialistic pattern, if we want to make equality principle a reality, then which kind of officers or ministers are to be appointed? Further, another obligation of it, very, very important, and this is absolutely important in the present circumstances also. Dhurta stri va shishu yasya mantrina syumo mahipate aniti pavan kshipta karyabdhaus nimajjati. Dhurt is rogue. Now, if the king's wife or son is a hypocrite or a rogue, then or we use the term rogue, or we can use even the term sly. Sly is a term, English term for dhurt. Then what will happen? Destruction of such a king. And even today, you can turn back the pages of history and you can find out wherever any ruler had blind love. Now, there's a difference between unconditional love and blind love. Love should not be blind. It may be unconditional by the parents. So where there is blind love, now what happens? Now this shloka says that then in such case, the king will get his boat of functioning drowned. Not only the functioning will drown, and this will ultimately lead to destruction of the state also. I think I need not to give any example because I don't want to personalize anything. And you can understand what happens. Then आत्मनश्च परेशान च यह समीक्ष्य बलाबलम अंतरम न एव जानाति स तिरस्क्रियते रिभि. Now this is again very, very important. Whosoever is in a position in the modern times, हमके जिसके पास कुर्सी है, then must understand the difference between his ability and others' ability. Neither jealousy should be there, nor inferiority complex. And if you can understand the distinction between your ability and others' ability, I think you will be able to improve on yourselves. And you are not able, neither you are able nor you want to learn from others' abilities, then this shloka, because this is true about those times only, talks about that even the enemy will not respect you. Disrespect by. आपने कई बार हम कहते हैं कि अगर शत्रु भी विद्वान है, समझदार है, उससे भी सीख लो. But then you say, oh, no issue, I can handle this man. Many a time you say, I can handle this person. He has no ability. He is useless. So that means you have no issue. Then you concentrate on other things. Then another very, very important quality of a king, which even today is applicable. Mantra bijam idam guptam rakshaniyam yatha tatha. Managapi na bhidyete tadvitra na prorahati. Now, here mantra is mantrana. Mantrana, I hope you understand, consultation. If the king has consultation with the ministers, then it should be kept confidential. If it is not kept confidential, then that consultation process goes waste. Right? And you know, what kind of example is given here, that if you uproot any plant, now root is out of the earth, soil, can the plant grow? Answer is no. So that means if you can't keep the consultation, then the value of consultation goes, perishes, becomes redundant. Now here, I again make a reference to Article 74. Advice given by the ministers. I can remind you of, if I rightly remember, I think Kehar Singh's case of 1989, where the Supreme Court said, which advice is given by the Council of Ministers cannot be questioned in a court of law. Confidentiality. And if you read section 8 of RTI Act also, then what is exempted? We talk about cabinet advice. We include there. So this is the value of keeping confidentiality. This is another quality, duty of a king. Then coming to real court niti, of Kautilya. Uttamam pranipaten shuram bheden yojayet. Nicham alpradane nashtam dharmen yojayet. It talks about the qualities. Now, if you want to lead, if you want to be a ruler, if you want to be a king, bow before who is superior to you. अपने से श्रेष्ठ को प्रणाम करें. उत्तमम प्रणिपातेन. शूरम भेदेन योजयेत. Now this is Kootaniti. Who is Shuram? Shur is for Veer. Shur Veer we say, but here we can take the interpretation of who has the power. Such person you can handle by using the policy of division, Bheden. And says Nicham Alpa Pradanen Ishta. जो निम्न कोटि का व्यक्ति है, belongs to a low class, not because in the modern times what he talked has taken birth in a particular class, but because of his deeds. You can satisfy him by giving something. And just keep it in your mind, when we talk about good governance, such situation leads to corruption ultimately. Then further says, Eshtam dharmen yojayet. Whom you need, convince him in dharmen, lawful manner. Now, this is the quality of any ruler. I am not talking about king now because we are in a democratic country. Then further it says, Anagat vidhata cha pratyutpan matishchaya dvavev sukham medhete dirgha sutri vinashyati. Now, it means Anagat vidhata. In fact, this shloka talks about two kinds of kings or rulers. One who Anagat Vidhata, Anagat, we don't know about. We prepare ourselves about the any bad time or any bad situation in advance. And second is Pratyutpan Matishchaya, who pays attention according to context or need. If these two types of kings or rulers are there, I think there will be no issue. And it further says, Dirgha Sutri Vinashyati, who always postpones. है ना, कहते हैं ना फाइलों पे सो गए, जो फाइल पे सो जाते हैं उनका विनाश हो जाता है. So this is true even today. I talk about the quality of the king to appoint the people on merit and consider the merit and not become prey to the fools. मूर्खे नियोज्यमाने तु त्रया दोषा महीपते अयश्च अर्थनाशश्च नरके गमनम तथा. Who, now what happens? The three bad qualities of the king. One is he gets his name maligned. Second, he loses wealth. And third is ultimately goes to hell. When? If he appoints, say, Murkhe niyojya mane. If he appoints fools. Then Kautilya talked about the policy of wisdom. Vrajanti te mut dhyam para bhavam bhavanti maya vishu yena mayin. Now this is in fact the Kootaniti. Many a time when we talk about sanskaras, we say no. Now, if we go to Buddhism, then we say even if other person is doing wrong, ना वो कहते हैं कि जैसे गांधी जी ने कहा था कि एक गाल पे कोई आपके चांटा मारे तो दूसरा आगे कर दो ना. Kautilya never advised. Now in this shloka, Kautilya says that you behave like a rogue or hypocrite with any hypocrite person. कांटे को कांटे से निकालिए. And the king who does not do like this cannot be successful and easier, he is a fool. Now, this is a very practical approach in the modern times also. And I just continue with same kind of approach, which we must learn. No, but I will not say by hook or by crook, because keep it in your mind throughout the Kautilya talks about attaining everything through lawful means. Na atyantam sarlai bhavyam pashya gatva vanasthalim chidyante saral tatruk kubja asti shanti panguvat. Means if you are too simple, too innocent, then anybody can harm you, anybody can destroy you. Now, he gives the example of that if you need wood from the jungle, then that tree which is standing straight, because it is always easy to cut such a tree, that tree will be cut. And the tree which is in the crooked form, so many branches are there, so many roots are there, nobody will touch it. And another very, very important shloka where when we talk about exercise of power, how a reaction, action and reaction, I'll be referring to this. Korvam sankochamasthāye prahar nami marshet prapte kale che matima anutishte krishna sarpavat. It talks about Kachua tortoise. Now what happens? How do you know how the tortoise protects itself? Must have seen some video. Now it just goes into its skin only. Head is hidden in the its body only, skin only. See, most of the time that means if instead of reacting, you can save yourself, avoiding the situation, ignoring the situation. But Kautilya never advised this in all the situations, because first thing is you avoid. But if it is not avoidable, then he says you chirp like a snake. Snake की, सांप की फुंकार से अगले को डराइए. You must have the power and ability. First, to ignore, because it is not always good to enter into any kind of conflict or dispute. Then 5 qualities I'm talking about the king. He says, Dushtasya danda, swajanasya puja nyayen, koshasya hi vardhanam cha, apakshapata, nij rashtra raksha, panchaiva dharma. Dushtasya danda. Who is that person? Who is a guilty person? Punish him. Swajanasya puja. Worship, adore your own people. But not like the present day politicians that you love your own ones. And here I must tell you, when we talk about the 5 qualities of a king, for king, the whole public, सारी जो प्रजा है वही उनके अपने हैं, स्वजन है वो. And न्यायेन कोशस्य ही वर्धनम च, that you must increase your treasure, but in nyayen, in a lawful manner. Then apakshapata. Just note down, we have in the constitution equality principle. Equality principle is based on reasonable classification. Reasonable classification is basically no discrimination principle. This is what apakshapata means, that you don't discriminate with anybody on any ground. Nij Rashtra Raksha. Then security of the nation. Now these are the 5 duties of a king. And very interesting, one practical approach. Nowadays we use the term ethics. No. Professional ethics, medical ethics, lawyers ethics, rulers ethics. No, he also talked about ethics. And I hope you agree with me, being courteous, being punctual. No, this is the quality of any officer. If you are not courteous, Now what you do? ना आप किसी ऑफिसर के पास जाइए और वो 2 घंटे आपको दफ्तर के बाहर ही बिठा दे. What kind of feeling you have? Now this Kautilya could think at that time also that the king should not let anybody wait outside his court. Just imagine. Discipline, ethics, courtesy, character, all combined together. As I said, we have talked about the qualities, and as I just said that present time we don't talk about kingship. We have a democratic setup. We have a collective rule. And if we look at the constitution, we say we the people of India. So who is the sovereign? Sovereign is the constitution. And we have a parliamentary form of government. Everywhere we talk about majority opinion. So we nowadays we talk about good governance, we talk about open government, but nowhere we can think of anarchy, arajakta. And here we talk about the concept of power. Power, I have told you what was the Rajya Dharma I have talked about in detail. And then in the present scenario, we talk about reconciling power with liberty. And I am really appreciative of Supreme Court of India having innovated the concept of public accountability. Those who misuse the power can be made personally liable. Now, when we talk about liberty, because time is not that much that I go into detail about every aspect like liberty, but I'll just touch it. And I would like to quote Swami Vivekananda. He said, liberty in thought and action is the only condition of life, growth, and well-being. Where it does not exist, the man, the race, and the nation must go down. But at the same time, which is very, very important. See, Swami Vivekananda talked about. And Swami Vivekananda, I must tell you, he was impressed by and his views, his thought process, his philosophy was based on mainly Upanishads. So, and we are going to correlate with the present times also. He said, none deserves liberty who is not ready to give liberty. I hope you understand it. And in the present scenario also, we may just make one statement that there is no absolute freedom, there is no absolute right. Right? Now here, when this is to be used, power. In the present scenario, we make a distinction. We say no governance can be there, no administration can be there unless and until discretionary power is vested. And discretionary power we talk in contradiction to arbitrary exercise of power. Right? And I think you must be immediately reminded of Dyson concept of rule of law. When he said justice should be done according to the known principles of law, and he was against the use of wide discretionary power. And we distinction between what is discretion and what is arbitrary exercise of power. Now, first of all, I am talking about today, and then you will be able to correlate with. I am going to refer to Chanakya once again, that power has to be vested. We have understood. From the ancient times, from the Vedic times, we talk about exercise of power. Mode of exercise might be different. So we cannot say that we can survive without the use of power. But power has to be used for the purpose for which the power is vested. Cannot be misused. You cannot act malafide with bad intention. Right? And discretion is when power is vesting in us. We know how to exercise the power because complete guidelines are there, limitations are prescribed, control mechanism is there. And movement, there is no prescription of power, no limits on the exercise of power, no control over the exercise of power, then what it means? It means I can exercise the power as per my whims and fancies. Then we call it as arbitrary exercise of power. I would just like to quote Chanakya. Kah kalah kani mitrani ko desha kau vyay gamau. Kaschaham ka cha me shaktiriti chintayam mohur mohra. Which means consider again and again the following: the right time, the right friends, the right place, the right means of income, the right ways of spending, and very, very, very important, from whom you derive your power. Now, there was the same concept of power. Then we had Sanskrit language. There's no word discretion in Sanskrit. I tell you, in Sanskrit, we use the terms like Vivek, Gyan. I again talk about the shloka. Sahasa vidadit na kriyam aviveka parma padam padam. You know what it means? Vivek. Vivek means discretion. Use your discretion, but use the discretion with wisdom. And when you say param apadam padam, that when you don't use your vivek or discretion, you are inviting the problems, the difficulties. Further, he uses, I'm not talking about the full shloka, only that part. He says, Agyan Nashini Pragya. I hope this much Hindi you understand. Agyan you understand, opposite of Gyan. Nashini means destroys. Pragya means buddhi. So that means your buddhi. Now buddhi, this pragya is also used for this discretion only. That agyan, your ignorance. Your ignorance ends your buddhi, your wisdom, and of course then discretion. And I talk about another shloka. Again, discretion is to be exercised without discriminating. I refer to Article 14. And I'll be referring to more principles on this just after this. Ayam nija paroveti gadna lagu chetasam udar charita nam tu vasudhaiv kutumbakam. It means those with a narrow thinking have two different outlooks towards common matters relating to themselves and others. Have you followed? Two different interpretation means different for me, different for you. For those who are magnanimous and noble, the entire world is like a family. Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. And their approach towards all matters is uniform. Just understand. Approach towards all matters uniform, which means no discrimination. So if you have to use your power, if you have to use a discretion, then without discriminating. Immediately I am reminded of our constitution. Fundamental rights part, if you go there, if I remind you of E.P. Royappa's decision of 1934, which says equality is antithetic to arbitrariness. And if I remind you of Article 15 and 16, no discrimination on certain grounds. Grounds are mentioned. Religion, race, caste, sex, place of birth. If I further go to Article 60, descent, right? Residence. So no discrimination. Even if we have to use the discretion. Now I have referred to Arthashastra. Arthashastra resembles, in fact, Aristotle's Politics and Hobbes' Leviathan. Because in all these situations, the effort had been to just disintegrate politics from religion and morality. Now, see, now what is happening in the present day scenario when we refer to this Joseph Shine's case, Navtej Singh Johar, Shaira Bano's case, or Sabrimala issue, the Supreme Court has even talked about distinction between morality and constitutionality. I want to tell you, there was a reference. There was no constitution. There was Kautilya's Niti. There was Arthashastra. There were Vedas. There was Smritis. But we did talk about morality in the society and morality in Vyavahar, conduct. These were different. So, in fact, Kautilya also, like other, because here we talk about other thought process, because this capacity building program is on comparative public law. So, in every situation, the emphasis was on a realist understanding of politics, need to preserve, need to expand the power of the state. Now, one doubt many a time arises, that is the nomenclature of Chanakya's Arthashastra. Arth, in fact, in the meaning is money. But here, it does not mean money. It means that how you have to, it is focuses on how you have to use the power. It is focused on the subsistence of human beings. I hope you understand. For subsistence of human beings, what is required is personal, social, spiritual growth, but this can be there only when his needs are fulfilled and only when there is a secure environment. And whatever I talked about Rajakta or Rajya Dharma or qualities of the king, these are very, very important. And now I would also like to talk about the concept of accountability in the old culture, Sanskrit culture. For accountability, what is very, very important, even appointment of ministers. I'm reminded of Article 75, where we talk about union ministers' appointments. Or when we talk about the qualification to become MP or MLA, right? Number of qualifications. I won't concentrate on others. One is citizen. This right is given to the citizen. Second, I'll talk about, which is very, very important, that you should not hold office of profit. Now, this has a relationship with the concept of accountability. You can go and read Jaya Bachchan's case, Dayanand Sahaya's case, that what is this office of profit in detail. And here, when the question of appointment of ministers was there, we have the opinion of Bhardwaj, Rishi Bhardwaja. He said the king shall employ his classmates as his ministers, for they can be trusted by him inasmuch as he has personal knowledge of their honesty and capacity. Right, to some extent. That you know somebody is married, and you know he will be a good confederate of yours. But just imagine, if such a system is established, then I think we'll have to amend our constitution. I remind you, there's one ground where no discrimination. When we refer to public employments under Article 16, one of the ground is no discrimination on the ground of descent, your close relatives. Now, this was not agreed upon by Visal Saab. He said, no, for as they have been his playmates as well, they would despise him, but he shall employ as minister those whose secrets possessed of in common are well known to him. Another Kootaniti. But appoint the person whose secrets you know. Now, I just tell you, In Kautilya's Arthashastra only, he talks about that there are shlokas where reference is made that after the ministers are appointed, they be lured with money through spies so as to test their character. Even there are shlokas that there are female spies who will go and tell those mantris that the queen is interested in you, trying to allure the ministers to test again his loyalty and his character. Now, what do you think? We need to adopt. We should not forget this Kootaniti. And concept of then, because power cannot be controlled. Exercise of power cannot be controlled unless and until who exercises the power can be made accountable. I find the reference in Kautilya's Arthashastra only that those ministers who keep him from falling a prey to damages, dangers to king, I'm referring to king, and who by striking the hours of the day as determined by measuring shadows, warn him of his careless proceedings, even in secret, shall be respected. That only those who can tell him where you are wrong, where you will be facing damage or danger, those should be appointed. And clearly Kautilya says that sovereignty is possible only with assistance. A single wheel can never move. Then appointment of ministers, but the king must be satisfied in all respects about his ability, about and then how to exercise the power. Just imagine Kautilya even talked about, because at that time a great concentration and emphasis was on religion also. It says, I am just referring to this fifth prakaran of this Kautilya Shastra, that it says that king shall dismiss a priest who, when ordered, refuses to teach the Vedas to an outcast person. Imagine, now why I am referring, again, no discrimination principle. Then I am just coming to the question of accountability. Now here, if you remove such priest, then he also talks about the consequences, that such person will malign the name of the king and even try to just hatch conspiracy against the king. So the king must be prepared with it. That is why the focus is on appointment of good ministers. Now Chanakya clearly says, यथा चतुर्भि कनकम परीक्षते निघर्षण छेदन ताप ताड़नई तथा चतुर्भि पुरुष परीक्षते त्यागेन शीलेन गुणेन कर्मणा. It means kanak. Kanak is gold. Gold is tested in 4 ways: by rubbing, cutting, heating, and beating. So man should be tested by these 4 things: his renunciation, his conduct, his qualities, and his actions. And the question of accountability is also referred to by Chanakya. He says the government servants should not only be confiscated of their ill-earned hoards, but also be transferred from one work to another, so that they cannot either misappropriate government money or vomit what they have eaten up. Imagine now what it is: neither misappropriation nor misuse nor hoarding. All the 3 aspects he talks about as a concept of accountability. In the present scenario, we have most of you must be aware of the Hofeldian concept of rights and duties. And when we talk about the concept of power, then power has a dual contradict, that is immunity. That if I have power, I am immune. it has dual correlative, that is liability. That if I have power, you are liable. And it has dual opposite, that is disability. If I have power, then you are disabled. That means you are supposed to obey me. You have no other option except to obey me. Now, as I was just referring to before talking about the literature, the Sanskrit shlokas, I must say that in the present scenario, maybe in the Indian context, or we must have derived many concepts from the Western culture also, like I can refer to Wednesbury principle, which we derived from the English decided in 1947, Associated Provincial Picture House Limited versus Wednesbury Corporation, that whenever power is to be exercised, then there must be plausible justification for the exercise of power. And this we adopted in India, the Indian Supreme Court in 1996 in the case of Delhi Science Forum versus Union of India. And even what I discussed with you about the concept of power, that was beautifully laid down by the Supreme Court in, I am just referring to two very, very important decisions like Chairman and Managing Director UCO Bank versus PC Kakkad, and Indian Railway Construction Company versus Ajay Kumar. Both are 2003 and decided by the Supreme Court. And then, because I talked about the duties of the king, qualities of the king has to consult. But can the king, ultimate power rests with the king? Can the king further delegate that power? Answer is no. Ultimately, final decision, as I told you, even Mauryan period, Gupta period, king had all the three kinds of power: legislative, executive, and judicial. So I can also quote a very important case, which is in administrative law, the case of Anirudh Singh Ji, Karan Singh Ji Dudeja versus State of Gujarat of 1995, that power is vested in X. X cannot act under the dictates of A, who is superior. X cannot delegate that power to Y, who is subordinate to him. So this is the concept of power. Now, if the power is misused, now misuse may be of different kinds, like you fail to exercise power, you exceed your power, you abuse your power. And then in the present circumstances, because there we talk, I'm going to talk after this about the Dandaniti also, because if anybody is guilty, then punishment has to be imposed. Now here I talk about, we are very, very fortunate that we are in a democratic setup, and we have the not absolute federal structure, quasi-federal structure, but we have a very strong judiciary and strong concept of judicial review. And it is unlike even United States of America, where this power of judicial review was usurped by the American Supreme Court in the case of Marbury versus Madison. But we have this inbuilt, if I refer to Article 13 of the Constitution. So number of grounds for the exercise of power of judicial review, especially when we are talking about this use, misuse, or excess of power on the ground of illegality, irrationality, procedural impropriety. And at the same time, because here I'm referring to this PC Kakkad's case, then I talk about Ajay Kumar's case, Supreme Court even added another ground, that is when it pricks the judicial conscience of the court. And we will find this reference in Dandaniti also. And then another concept was evolved by the Supreme Court in Om Kumar versus Union of India in 2001, that is doctrine of proportionality. I'm telling you it beforehand, and then I'll be discussing about the Dandaniti, that even the punishment or the penalty or the action taken has to be proportionate to the wrong committed. It cannot go beyond that. And I can just refer to few decisions of the Supreme Court. And I'll just quote a decision of 1996, M.K. Gupta versus Lucknow Development Authority. I would just like to quote the observation of the Supreme Court. I quote, "Under our constitution, sovereignty vests in the people. every limb of the constitutional machinery is obliged to be people-oriented. No functionary in exercise of statutory power can claim immunity except to the extent protected by the statute itself. Public authorities acting in violation of constitutional or statutory provisions oppressively, mind the word oppressively, are accountable for their behavior before authorities created under the statute like the commission or the courts entrusted with responsibility of maintaining the rule of law. I unquote. I think whatever I discussed, this observation of the Supreme Court is in consonance with whether I talked about qualities of a Raja, or I talked about Rajakta or discretion. Now, this is absolutely true about it. Now, I can again talk about Kautilya here just to make you understand clearly on public accountability. Niyukt karmsu Vyav Vishuddham Udayam Darshayet. It means it is a duty of elected or nominated authority to bring to table the net profit generated from the enterprise. And further, which is very, very important, which I intentionally left at that juncture when I was talking about the qualities of a Raja. प्रजा सुखे सुखम राजा प्रजा नाम च हिते हितम न आत्म प्रिय हितम राजा प्रजा नाम तु प्रियम hitam. It's the repetition of everything. The comfort, the happiness, the joy, the duty of a king is only public welfare and nothing else. Now, I would just try to make you clear this concept of public accountability. I'll just give you, in fact, there are floods of decisions on the point, but I would just touch a few to make you understand. We had a decision, it was among the first main decisions, Krishna Yadav versus State of Haryana of 1994. How in a selection process, the whole decision of appointments was absolutely changed because of, I hope you understand, corruption and nothing else. The list of elected candidates was changed, answer sheets were destroyed, and the fresh candidates were made to join on the spot without even medical examination. The Supreme Court referred this matter to the CBI, and all the charges are found to be nepotism, favoritism. All the charges are found to be true, and here the Supreme Court directed to compensate the victims and recover the amount of compensation from the pockets of the chairman and members of the selection committee. This is public accountability or personal liability. Different situation was there in LDA versus Lucknow Development Authority's M.K. Gupta's case. This is also of 1994. Now, this is the situation of commoner. If you can recollect, I talked about the duty of a king to protect the weak, to look after them. They should not leave the country unsatisfied. Now, here, one person at the verge of retirement, he applied for some house, made the full payment, still possession was not given. You understand the reason. Now, here again, compensation which was provided and recovered from the pockets of the guilty official. Not only this, the Supreme Court fixed the time period, hold disciplinary proceedings, and punish the guilty person and inform the registry of the court. Different situation we know in the present times. No doubt we have to, Dandaniti has to be there everywhere. We also have, but that does not mean that innocents should be killed. And this was the situation in Inder Singh versus State of Punjab, 1995, where fake encounter, and here again the Supreme Court awarded compensation to the legal heirs of the victims to be recovered from the pockets of the guilty police officials. And as if you remember, when I started with Arajakta, I said if there is no ruler, but and then I said if there is no good governance, then culturally we will be stagnant, and at the same time no development, no construction of, now clearly says no constructions of udyans. Now in the modern times he says parks. Now parks, these are the lungs of any city, and whenever town planning is there, then we take care of our lungs so that we breathe properly and we don't suffer from COVID-19 pandemic crisis. And I'm referring to GN Khajuria versus DDF 95, where land where the school was to be constructed, it was given for through illegal means for the construction of a plot. And imagine the contention that that right to education is also equally important as right to live in healthy environment. But here also the Supreme Court directed for the demolition of that constructed building of a school, and at the same time punishing the guilty officials. And Supreme Court beautifully observed. I would like to quote, then you can correlate with whatever I talked about in Sanskrit literature. No public officer should be allowed to make hay when the sun shines and retain the hay while the others suffers due to his illegal orders. And I would just also talk about another situation, again, power. Distinction between those who have power and those who are in the public, or what we say, power versus liberty. I'll just refer to the case of, this was Deepak Ghosh's case, where a judge of the High Court got some land allotted in a discretionary quota. Now, ultimately, he had to vacate, and this was sold in the public auction because of this public accountability. Number of such situations. And another, now because I talked about the appointment of ministers and I correlated it with the bureaucratic structure also, I'm referring to one decision of the Supreme Court also. This was T.N. Godavarman versus Ashok Court of 2006. This is T.N. Godavarman Thirumalpad versus Ashok Court. Now here, in fact, in 2006, now here what we I hope we know that all T.N. Godavarman cases, here the Supreme Court always directed for the protection of the forest, to use the forest for the purposes of the forest should be used. Now here directions are there that there should not be any establishment of a sawmill near the forest. No cutting of timber, no selling of timber. In spite of that, the orders are signed by the minister as well as the principal secretary. Now here the Supreme Court directed to award penalty on both of them. Now, this is how the Supreme Court of India talked about this public accountability. Then when we talk about good governance, we have a number of components. I've talked about accountability, and then I can refer to transparency also. We find a reference in Chanakya's Kutniti only about the transparency. It says, Saten dharyate prithvi, saten tapate ravi, saten vati vayushcha, sarvam satte pratishthitam. Saten dharate prithvi. Now, earth is supported by the power of truth. Saten tapti ravi. It is the power of truth that makes the sun shine. Saten vati vayushcha. And the winds blow because of truth. And sarvam satte pratishthitam, which means everything rests upon truth. Now, if we correlate with the present times, in many cases, the Supreme Court has used this term, the sunlight is the best disinfectant. That means satya, transparency. You tell the truth, make things transparent, only then there will be good governance. And we find this transparency in the Vedic times also. We like control of the political system vested in the local bodies, social and cultural bodies. Now, this is transparency. And there's a sukt Sukta of Rig Veda, which says, Samano mantra samiti samano samana manasa chittamepam. That public participation, transparency, functioning, and that too through collective bodies. Even Purush Sukta, if we read it, we find a reference to socialism. Now, socialism in the Indian context is what even Gandhian socialism is there, that the government must work to raise the standards of living, and all the people, all the citizens must be protected from cradle to the grave. And even in Mahabharata, we find a reference for public welfare. And at the same time, which is very, very important when we talk about whether we say good governance, there should be a cordial, amicable relationship between the ruler and the ruled. I hope we find a reference to this in our two epics, Mahabharata and Ramayana. Mahabharata, when Pandavas, they were going to the jungle, the public bitterly wept over it. And if I remind you, in Ramayana also, when Sri Ramachandra, he was going to Vanvas, the public of Ashodhya accompanied him till at the border of the jungle. Now, this is the love. In fact, it is not that we have to purchase votes. We have to earn votes by our deeds, by our love, by our care, which is very, very important. And even in the ancient India, we find a reference that if crime is committed by rich people, influential people, then more stringent punishment was there. It is not the situation what we have today, that even justice can be purchased. And even we find reference to this in Shukra Niti also. And if I read the writings of Valmiki, he, Valmiki recommends even imposition of death penalty for misappropriation of funds. Then another very important component is information, transparency. There cannot be transparency without right to information. Now we had this right to information. I think the interpretation of freedom of speech and expression, Article 19(1)(a), much later, I think 1990s, and then Freedom of Information Act 2002, which could not work. Then we had this Right to Information Act 2005. But Lord Krishna, he talked about transparency. He talked about this right to information in Bhagavad Gita. Karmanyopi bodhavyam bodhavyam cha vikarmana akarmanascha bodhavyam gahana karmano gati. It says, karmanyopi bodhavyam. Truth about the action must be known. Bodhavyam cha vikarmana. Truth about the inaction must be known. Why action is taken? Why action is not taken? I just take a pause. If you read even Prevention of Corruption Act, many other laws, what you find? If you fail to do what you are supposed to do, or you do what you are not supposed to do, then akarmanasya bodhavyam, truth about the prohibited action must be known. What you are prohibited to do, that must also be known. Gahana karmano gati. It means mysterious are the ways of action. Now here, I can remind you of principles of natural justice also. Mainly Third principle of natural justice, reasoned decision or speaking order. Whenever any action is taken, any decision is taken, then reasons why action is taken, why decision is taken must be known. Now, the last leg of what I'm going to discuss, because when we talk about exercise of power, that means we have to exercise power even for administration of justice. Chanakya or Kautilya stated in the Danda Niti, he talked about this Anvikshiki Traivartanam Yoga Kshema Sadhano Danda Tasya Niti Danda Niti. He talks about three things: Anvikshiki, Trai, and Varta. This is propagated by Manu, Shukracharya, and Brihaspati. Now, this deals with production, earning, safety, increments, distribution of commodities, policies of punishment, and punishment is very, very important. Even Manu Smriti, Manu goes to the extent of saying that Danda itself is king, that punishment is king, supreme. Say Danda Shasti Praja Sarva Dand Eva Bhi Rakshiti Teshu Jagrati Dandam Dharmam Vidurbhata. So even we find a reference in when we Kamantaki says suppression and eradication of crimes is Danda. Now this Danda Niti controls all the four varnas. King was the Kshatriya, priest, even priest duty we find in Danditi. I told you, priest has to act. And the Brahman, how duties of the Raja we know. Then duties of the Vaishya was to trader. Again, trading through lawful means. Shudra, not Shudra by birth, by caste, again has to perform to serve others. Now, all these are the, we talk about in Dandaniti only. And Dand is important even today. But as I correlated, I remind you, I reiterate what I said is that whenever punishment is to be imposed, now many things are important. The coordination of whatever we have discussed. Because we find a reference to, even in this Kautilya's Artha Shastra, to issuing of writs. Now we also have in Constitution, 5 writs can be issued. Now here, what kinds of writs can be issued? The reference was there: calumniation, ninda, and commendation, appreciation, inquiry, narration, request, refusal, censure, prohibition, command, conciliation, promise of help, threat, persuasion. 13 purposes are given for which writs could be served at that time. Now also we have this system, but I would like to say that the main focus is that we need to impose punishment, even though we may presume that humans are born free, humans are born good, humans are born saintly, but in case of any misconduct or wrong committed, now there may be in the present scenario different theories of punishment, but we find in Dandaniti punishment is to be awarded for the wrong. But at the same time, in our culture, the focus had been on repentance which will lead to reformation. Now, in the present scenario also, we talk about this reformative justice, we talk about restorative justice, where we not only concentrate on the victim, but also on the accused. That because the objective is to streamline so that he or she becomes a good citizen once again. Now, sometimes because heinous crimes are committed, even in the ancient times, even death penalty could be imposed. Like I talked about, even Valmiki recommended death penalty for misappropriation of funds. Because that shows your character. the fraudulent character, where you cheat the ruler. And as I emphasized number of times that in our cultural background, we look at the Vedic period, Mauryan period, Gupta period, which is known as Hindu period basically, that the concentration was on public welfare only. So same is true about when we talk about even imposition of penalty. Then another concept, two more concepts I have already discussed regarding this administration of justice. I can't go into details, that time is not there. This is a full-fledged topic, that is discretion. Now you can take the example, if you look into Indian Penal Code, discretion is given to the judges where penalty is to be imposed. Nowhere we find a fixed penalty. It may be either up to this much penalty or minimum to maximum is prescribed, and then discretion is there given, keeping into view the intention, the circumstances, the age, and other factors, right? And second is, as I have already discussed, I refer to Om Kumar's case, doctrine of proportionality, that the penalty should not be disproportionate to the wrong which is committed. And finally, I'll conclude. Those who don't know, so I must inform. Basically, I'm a poet by heart. So I'll be just reciting my poem, which is in Hindi. कानून कहीं अपराधी ना हो जाए, कानून कहीं अपराधी ना हो जाए, न्याय बनाया सर्वशक्तिमान ने. कानून कहीं अपराधी ना हो जाए, न्याय बनाया सर्वशक्तिमान ने. नियम केवल कानून के, नियम केवल कानून के नहीं, कानून के लिए भी नियम है बनाने. एथिक्स, कानून के लिए भी नियम है बनाने. कानून का पालन हम करें और कानून कराए नियमों से पालन. कानून का पालन हम करें और कानून कराए नियमों से पालन, तभी सर्वमान्य होगी न्याय प्रणाली और उसका शासन. तभी होगी सर्वमान्य न्याय प्रणाली और उसका शासन. अवलोकन और आलोचना संतानें हैं किसी भी व्यवस्था की. अवलोकन और आलोचना संतानें हैं किसी भी व्यवसाय की. इनकी अवहेलना और उल्लंघना है गाथा व्यवस्था की व्यथा की. इनकी अवहेलना और उल्लंघना है गाथा व्यवस्था की व्यथा की. न फेंको पत्थर न्याय के मंदिर पर, न फेंको पत्थर न्याय के मंदिर पर, बिन सोचे बिन जाने ही. न फेंको पत्थर न्याय के मंदिर पे बिन सोचे बिन जाने ही. नहीं करो प्रदूषित इसकी वेदी, चाहे भ्रष्ट हो इसके कण अनजाने ही. अगर रक्षक है न्यायाधीश, अगर रक्षक है न्यायाधीश न्याय मंदिर के, अगर रक्षक है न्यायाधीश न्याय मंदिर के, तो वकील हैं इसके सेनानी. अगर रक्षक है न्यायाधीश न्याय मंदिर के, तो वकील हैं इसके सेनानी. सामंजस्य, सहजता और सरलता हो मगर निष्पक्षता ना हो बेमानी. निष्पक्षता इज नो डिस्क्रिमिनेशन, इम्पार्शियलिटी. न्यायमूर्तियों का दर्जा शायद आता है रब के बाद, न्यायमूर्तियों का दर्जा शायद आता है रब के बाद, परंतु मानव है रब नहीं, कोई नहीं कमजोरियों से आजाद. सुसंस्कृत और नियंत्रित हो जिरा के शब्दों के चित्र. सुसंस्कृत और नियंत्रित हो जिरा के और प्रशासन के चित्र, चाहे हो अदालत या प्रशासन. बंद द्वार हो या सभी होने चाहिए तुम्हारे मित्र. एंड फाइनली आई प्रे, हे ईश्वर, हे ईश्वर, निंदा और स्तुति से दूर रहें. Neither we talk ill of others nor flatter anybody. हे ईश्वर, निंदा और स्तुति से दूर रहें. ये न्याय की देवी तो अच्छा है. शब्दों की तलवार जिह्वा की म्यान से ना निकले तो अच्छा है. शब्दों की तलवार जिह्वा की म्यान से ना निकले तो अच्छा है. Thank you. God bless all of you.
Thank
I
you so
hope I
much.
have not exceeded the time because this is lunch time.
No worries, ma'am. We'll give them an extra 5 minutes in their break. Ma'am, thank you so much. You have encompassed all the aspects of administrative law, and in that you started the reference from Ramayana, and you have then shifted to the concepts as has been evolved in Arthashastra. More than being an academic discourse, ma'am, I think this has also given a lot of anecdotes for most of us to follow in life generally as well, because these thoughts are not only there when we are a part of a system, but they are applicable also as individual human beings to us. Thanks for your enlightening words and the correlation that you have established between the traditional philosophical aspect of Hindu philosophy and the constitution and the current judicial trends. Thank you so much, ma'am, once again for your words. We look forward to the next session tomorrow. Thank you so much, ma'am.
See you tomorrow at 10, dealing with
Yes.
a different aspect.
Yeah. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thank you.
So to the participants, we will join again at 2 and hopefully we can start the session by 2:05 or 2:10. But be here by 2. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone.